The aspiring doctor was furious. He said $1,000 a month was barely enough to survive. Frustrated, he raised his voice at the clinic owner, calling it absurd that anyone would try to hire a trained professional for such a ridiculous amount. Maybe just because the place was a tiny, isolated town stuck between the countryside and the city. The clinic owner, calm in a way that almost felt rehearsed, tried to put things into perspective. He explained that this was simply the reality of the region, where the average income didn't go beyond that same $1,000. It was a transition area, not fully urban, not truly rural, and there just wasn't enough money circulating to offer more. He tried to change the subject, asking the young man what his plans were after leaving the job. Before he could answer, a young woman stepped in. She spoke loud enough for everyone to hear that the guy was Vigo's successor, and that no one in their right mind would accept a job with such terrible conditions. An older man, annoyed by the tension, shifted the focus by commenting to a woman about his daughter Laura. He told her the girl needed more composure and should be wearing stockings while on duty. Laura pushed back, saying the heat was unbearable, and took the chance to throw out a practical idea. They should just take down the "Doctor Wanted" sign at the clinic entrance. Her father didn't get the point right away, so she spelled it out. Because they were so close to City Hall and insisted on such strict standards, a little while later, a young man walking by noticed the sign and decided to go inside. As soon as he stepped through the door, he ran into Laura, the same girl who had just challenged her father. She was distracted, and the young man, named Linhouse, was instantly captivated. Her long, elegant legs caught his attention right away, leaving him completely speechless. Suddenly, a soap bubble popped in the air, breaking the silence and pulling everyone's eyes toward him. A small coincidence that would mark the beginning of something unexpected. Lino's first decision, still impressed by what he'd seen at the entrance, was to keep going and step further into the clinic. Inside, the owner, an elderly woman who kept the place more for attachment and companionship than for profit, already seemed to have lost hope of finding anyone willing to take the doctor position. But when the young man walked in, her expression changed. The discouragement faded, replaced by a curious mix of surprise and interest. Intrigued by her reaction, Lino joked, asking whether he really looked like the kind of woman who would catch the eye of an older man. She kept her composure and replied that he was far too young, and that for a doctor, that could be a bad sign. She advised him to leave if he was feeling uncomfortable. Lino, always honest, admitted that yes, he was a bit uncomfortable. The atmosphere grew tense, and the clinic owner, confused, asked why he had come in at all.
The young man answered bluntly that he had come specifically to appreciate the beautiful pair of legs he had noticed at the entrance. The boldness made the older man furious. He confronted Lino, reminding him that just seconds ago he'd said he was uncomfortable. Lino just gave a crooked smile and threw a teasing look, like someone who knew exactly the effect he caused. Then he noticed an open book on the table, a record listing the job requirements and contract details. Flipping through it out of curiosity, he calmly said that he had come there to apply for the doctor position. Trying to hold back his irritation, the clinic owner repeated the conditions: $1,000 a month, 9-hour shifts, and mandatory overtime in emergencies. Liner nodded, admitting the job sounded insane, but with an enigmatic tone he said the position was perfect for him. Surprised, the man asked when the new employee could start. Lino confidently replied that he was ready to start right away with no preparation at all. The old man stared at him in silence, thinking that idiots like that didn't exist. Yet one was standing right in front of him. Then it hit him. Something was very wrong with this whole conversation. Suspicious, he went straight to the point and asked if the guy even had any medical training. When he asked whether Lino had any kind of medical education, the answer was a simple no. Trying to stay calm, he pressed further, asking if Lino at least had a medical degree. Again, Lino said no. That was all it took for the owner to lose his patience. Desperate, he demanded that the young man show any document proving his credentials, a certificate, a license, anything. When nothing came, his frustration boiled over. Shouting, he ordered the imposter to get out immediately and go look for work somewhere else. But Lino didn't back down. He said he had already gone through the entire town looking for a job, and that this clinic was by far the best place he had found. Before the argument escalated, a woman's voice cut through the chaos. It was Laura, scolding her father for treating a visitor so rudely, especially in front of so many people. When she looked at Lino, she was visibly shocked. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. The two of them stared at each other as if the rest of the world had disappeared. It was a quick moment, but intense, enough to spark that almost magical flash of mutual attraction. Suddenly, Lino bowed in an elegant gesture, and without the slightest shame, commented on the beauty of her legs and their perfect proportions. Her father was furious, shouting that he wouldn't tolerate such insolence in the clinic, and demanding that the boy be thrown out immediately. But before anyone could react, something in the air changed. Lino caught a strong metallic scent, blood. Within seconds, the screams began. People shouted desperately for help, begging for a doctor. A young woman was carried inside with deep wounds to her torso and leg, bleeding heavily. A man covered in blood, someone no one seemed to recognize, screamed for someone to save her. Lino watched the scene, curious and tense, trying to understand what had happened to her. The clinic owner quickly took control. He announced that he was the only doctor available and knelt beside the patient to examine her. As soon as he bent down, he noticed something strange. The girl was holding a bloody piece of wood in her hand. The needle was deeply embedded in her leg, and blood kept streaming out, staining the clinic floor bright red. The doctor studied the situation with a tight expression and declared that it was serious. She needed to be taken to a hospital with proper equipment. Her companion, frantic, said he had already called an ambulance, but begged the doctor to do something before it was too late.
Visibly nervous, the clinic owner insisted that the patient was in shock and that he didn't want to take responsibility if things got worse. The boy, desperate, practically fell to his knees, begging the doctor to try anything. He said that they didn't act fast, the girl would die right there from the blood loss. The victim was pale, gasping, covered in blood, barely staying conscious. Even so, the doctor chose to push the strangers away, telling them to wait outside. He said, coldly, that he wouldn't allow a corpse to remain in his clinic. Those words made the boy lose control. His eyes filled with tears and anger as he demanded to know what the man meant by that. The clinic owner raised his chin, ready to defend himself if someone tried to attack him. His assistant, shocked, questioned how he could say something like that in such a serious emergency. At that moment, Lino stepped closer to the wounded girl. He looked her over carefully and with an unsettling calm, commented that with injuries like those, it was more realistic to prepare a funeral than wait for the ambulance. His words made the companion panic even more, crying and offering any amount of money to save her. But the doctor just shook his head, insisting the procedure was too risky and that the best option was to wait for the rescue team. Even Laura, who had been watching silently until then, finally snapped. She asked her father how he could be so cold when a life was hanging by a thread. Lino's heart nearly jumped out of his chest when he heard Laura say she trusted him. Even with the clinic owner still grumbling, he didn't waste any time. He explained firmly that the girl couldn't wait and that they had to decide quickly what to do, while someone called the victim's boyfriend, or as they soon found out, her brother. The guard assessed the situation in a second and agreed. It was a race against the clock. The companion stopped hesitating. With pleading eyes, he begged them to save her at any cost. Lino then gave clear orders, acting like an improvised leader. Place the girl on the only table available and prepare the bare minimum needed to intervene. Everyone moved, carefully, and the young woman was laid there. The old clinic owner spat anger, saying that it was his property, shouting his complaints as loudly as he could. The victim's brother exploded. He threatened, screaming that no one was allowed to touch his sister without his permission. He wanted the doctor to shut up. The nurse, looking like someone who had seen everything already, asked if there was a surgical table. Of course there wasn't. Laura admitted right away they didn't even have a decent hospital bed. The only acceptable surface was an old, patched-up regular table. Lino looked around, assessed the improvised setup, and set the rules. Anyone who wasn't essential had to leave. No one would enter without authorization. They started escorting the owner out, but he resisted, clinging to the counter like it was part of his soul. The girl's brother refused to step away from his sister. He screamed that he couldn't leave her side because he was terrified for her. In all that chaos, an important detail came to light. The wounded girl wasn't anyone's girlfriend. She was the sister of the guy begging for help. Understanding the dynamic, Lino grabbed a scalpel and accepted the brother's condition. He would operate right there with whatever they had. The young man spiraled into panic, shouting and demanding guarantees
guarantees, unable to understand why his sister needed to be partially undressed just to treat a leg injury. Lino stayed calm. He explained patiently and directly that examining and properly draining the wound required removing part of her clothing to check circulation, hidden injuries, and stop the bleeding. Basic routine, nothing sensational. He emphasized that Jenda didn't change the professionalism of the procedure and asked for silence so he could work. The improvised surgeon made it clear that if he was being deceived and failed to save the girl, he wouldn't let it slide. The girl's brother, even reluctantly, finally left the room, but not without first begging them to save Chayun, pleading for them to bring her back alive. Now fully focused, Lino asked Lori to prepare a solution and listed, with precision, everything he would need for the procedure. His expression changed completely. The playful attitude disappeared, replaced by an almost surgical focus, which left Laura surprised. She watched him in silence, trying to understand how that impulsive boy had suddenly turned into someone so serious. The intensity of her gaze made him visibly uncomfortable, and he eventually asked if there was something strange on his face. Laura simply replied that it wasn't the time for distractions and asked them to bring what he had requested. The nurse returned with an improvised box full of basic medical supplies, and Lino began preparing the workspace. When Laura held the patient's arm, he noticed fracture. He asked what they should do if the area where the needle was embedded was also compromised. Surprised, the girl called him by name, Lin Hao. And strangely, that made him smile. It had been a long time since anyone called him that, and hearing it brought something back inside him, maybe pride or nostalgia from another life. At that moment, the nurse suggested covering the patient's body, worried that the nudity might distract him. Lino replied in his usual provocative tone, implying she was just jealous of the patient's body. Laura was offended by the comment, and asked how he could say something so ridiculous at a moment like this. He just gave a small laugh and, in a gesture almost gentlemanly, said she had no reason to feel insecure. Her proportions were perfect too.
The tension rose, but the mood shifted when the guy suddenly started bleeding from his nose, clearly overwhelmed by nerves, or maybe by too much emotion for an improvised doctor. Embarrassed, he admitted it was a moment of weakness, letting his eyes wander, and quickly asked for small pieces of wood. Laura found it odd until he explained they would be used to stabilize the patient's broken bones. Even without fully understanding, she was impressed. Despite the improvised setting, he seemed to know what he was doing. Using the wood pieces, they improvised splints and immobilized the girl's fractured arm to prevent further damage. While examining the rest of her body, Lino realized how serious her condition was. She was on the brink of collapse, and he warned them that the next part would be the most delicate and decisive step of the rescue. The nurse, who had doubted him before, started seeing him differently, believing that maybe that makeshift doctor was much more capable than he looked. While the boy examined the patient, his nose started bleeding again, a reflex of the stress and pressure surrounding him. Even so, he kept his composure and admitted that the girl's condition was critical. He said he could treat her, but the place didn't have the proper equipment, and warned that she might end up with a scar. The nurse, outraged, shouted that this wasn't the time to worry about appearance, calling him crazy for thinking about that in the middle of an emergency. He prepared an improvised solution, lit a flame, and calmly explained that the heat would kill viruses and bacteria. His expression changed. All the arrogance disappeared, and for the first time, he looked like a real surgeon, focused, methodical, and cold. He said there was no other choice, and then began the procedure with what he had available. When he removed a piece of wood embedded in the patient's leg, the wound started bleeding in a frightening way. Laura panicked, shouting that the blood wouldn't stop and that the girl would die if he didn't do something. But the boy stayed calm and replied with irony, saying this wasn't childbirth and she needed to breathe. Right after that, he showed that the bleeding had already been controlled. Laura was speechless. It looked like magic. He explained that he had pressed a specific point on the body to stop the flow, a simple but effective technique. He then asked the nurse to bring an essential medication to continue, but the problem was that the clinic didn't have anything like that. When she explained that their supplies were limited and they didn't have expensive medicine, Lino sighed and asked for at least something equivalent. Realizing time was against them, the nurse ran off to look for any substitute. Meanwhile, she confessed that she didn't know exactly where to apply the right pressure. Without wasting time, Lino moved behind her and guided her precisely on how to position her hands.
Slowly, she found the exact point. the spot where the blood began flowing in a controlled way again. Thanks to their coordination, the bleeding was stabilized, and the surgery was able to continue. The tension in the room eased for a moment, and for the first time, Laura realized that the impulsive boy actually knew what he was doing. The young doctor reinforced how important that moment was. He couldn't lose the pressure point that was controlling the bleeding. Determined, he continued the procedure, focused on saving the unconscious girl's life. He then asked them to turn on a phone flashlight to better illuminate the surgical area. The assistant found the idea annoying, but the operation required maximum precision and constant lighting. After locating the severed artery, he asked for the phone to be turned off, saying the light was interfering with his concentration. The nurse, watching everything, was stunned. How could someone with such improvised medical skills act with so much confidence and efficiency without proper equipment? Lino reassured everyone, explaining that he had methods to handle the situation. He prepared his hands and began stitching the wound on the girl's thigh, determined to stop the bleeding for good. Sweating from the effort, he asked the assistant to wipe his forehead during the critical moment. Meanwhile, he kept suturing with precision, focused, but with a slight smile of satisfaction. Finally, he announced he was done. All the wounds had been successfully stitched. The nurse checked the patient, placing her hand on the girl's forehead. Still a bit stunned by everything that had happened, she timidly admitted that she had gotten lost at times and forgotten small details, but Lino assured her everything was under control. He checked the girl's pulse and confirmed she was stable, reminding them that they would need to monitor for signs of infection in the next few hours. He looked at the clock and was surprised. The entire complex procedure had been completed in just 15 minutes, an impressively short time for such a critical situation. The young nurse stepped into the hallway and announced to everyone anxiously waiting the operation had been completed successfully and without complications. The victim's brother, still nervous, asked if his sister was really okay and safe. A clinic employee, skeptical, commented that the girl was probably already dead, doubting that someone so inexperienced could have handled the situation, especially after losing his patience and yelling at the clinic owner. Outraged by the comment, Lino cut off any doubts and firmly stated that the girl was alive and completely out of danger. The older man still hesitated, arguing that the patient had fallen into a coma because of the hemorrhage and couldn't possibly have been saved there. The nurse confirmed the young doctor's words, assuring that the situation was indeed under control.
With that, everyone was allowed to enter and see the patient. Lino suggested they relax and observe while he prepared to leave before the ambulance arrived. The clinic owner's daughter ran to him, begging him not to leave and asking him to stay at the clinic. The young doctor, with a casual smile, explained that he needed to eat and find a place to rest. The assistant suggested they go to Laura's house for lunch or dinner, but the nurse yelled in outrage, calling him an idiot for trying to take advantage of the situation. Unbothered, Lino simply stood up and walked out. The clinic owner remained speechless, unable to believe that someone so young and supposedly inexperienced had actually saved the patient. Before leaving, Lino approached the girl's brother and charged him $10,000 for the operation. The young man replied that there was no need to even mention an amount, since even $10,000 would have been acceptable, surprising Lino. However, he then admitted that he had lost his wallet and only had $100 in cash. The clinic owner immediately stepped in, saying that the operation had been performed in his establishment and that the payment belonged to him. The owner's daughter, outraged, scolded her father for being so greedy. He justified himself by saying that all the equipment used in the operation belonged to the clinic. Frustrated with the situation, the victim's brother called the old man terrible while the ambulance took his sister, now finally stabilized, to the hospital. C introduced himself, mentioned Cheyenne's sister's name, and invited the young doctor to visit them whenever he wanted. Lino heard the invitation, and from his expression, it was clear he was very interested. Even so, he said it was already late and he needed to leave. The nurse tried to stop him while the clinic owner's daughter begged her father to offer the young man a job, insisting they couldn't let someone that talented walk away. Even the owner himself reluctantly ended up agreeing. He invited Lino to step inside the clinic for a more serious conversation, acknowledging that without him, the situation could have ended in tragedy. The daughter reinforced that this was the best job opportunity he could get and that he should accept it. Trying to stay calm, the father asked his daughter to control her emotions when discussing professional matters. The older man then asked the young doctor's full name, and Lino introduced himself as Lin Hao, asking not to be called Kid anymore. The owner offered a monthly salary of $1,000, as in their original agreement, but Lino refused immediately. The improvised surgeon demanded $3,000, to which the old man replied sarcastically that he might as well rob a bank. Lino then lowered his demand to $2,500, stating that this was his final number. The clinic owner countered with $1,200 with no intention of going higher. Outraged by the owner's greed, Lino lowered his minimum to $2,000.
The nurse stepped in, suggesting $1,700, while the owner's daughter reminded them that Lino didn't have any official medical certification, arguing that he shouldn't be humiliated in front of everyone. The old man shouted, demanding that his daughter stop criticizing his decisions, but Lino stayed calm and said he didn't care about formalities. Without housing or food, he would simply starve. The tension was high, but it was clear that the deal needed to be settled fairly. The clinic owner then suggested, in a bizarre attempt to solve the housing issue, that Lino marry his daughter and stay in her room. The young improvised surgeon refused immediately, saying that physical contact between a man and a woman was unacceptable and that they should find another solution. An older gentleman then proposed offering him accommodation in the clinic's storage room in exchange for some kind of electronic medical certificate. Lino, however, revealed that he didn't even have that certificate, complicating his situation even more. The owner demanded at least some form of identification, but the boy honestly replied that he didn't have that either, surprising everyone present. With a mischievous smile, he explained that he came from the mountains, hinting at his hermit-like origins. The nurse, dissatisfied, suggested that he should go find a room immediately. The owner, worried about his daughter's safety, insisted that Lino could be a criminal or a terrorist. The daughter protested, asking where those suspicions even came from, and suggested that her father go home and prepare something for them to eat. As she moved closer, she whispered to her father, asking if he really distrusted the boy. Lino, watching everything, wondered how they could think he was a bad person. The old man eventually gave in, agreeing to go home, and told his daughter to take care while staying around the stranger. Lino realized everything was happening too fast, and suggested that they should get to know each other first. He told the young woman that since she wanted him to come along so badly, he would appreciate it if she opened the door for him. She replied that he talked too much, and it would be better if they went in silence. Lino, surprised and thinking about his luck, had never imagined women could be so forward. The assistant then explained the need to check the availability of medical equipment and medicine at the clinic. The young man was stunned, and she clarified that otherwise it wouldn't make sense for them to invite him to stay. It was a way to avoid having critical situations like today's happen again. The clinic owner's daughter commented, almost laughing, that her father usually only dealt with headaches and mild fevers, showing that the clinic wasn't prepared for real emergencies. She explained that because her father only treated headaches and mild fevers, he never needed strong medication. He simply wasn't used to handling more serious emergencies. It was a long story, but she suggested they prepare the room first. Meanwhile, the nurse, busy cleaning, ended up slipping off a chair and falling quickly. Lino rushed over to catch her and prevent her from getting hurt, but in the middle of the chaos, the girl fell on top of him, creating an extremely awkward moment for both of them.
Immediately, she punched him, called him stupid, and told him to be more careful so he wouldn't break anything, apologizing afterward for the harsh reaction. The assistant thought all the family's bad luck had started with that incident, and that since then, everything seemed to be changing for them. Trying to ease the tension, Lino commented that he was starving and suggested they go buy some food while she told the whole story. When they reached the city, he realized how loud and big the place was compared to the mountains he came from. As they walked, the young doctor noticed that many houses on that side of town looked old and abandoned. When they reached a particular home, the nurse showed a very sad expression, and Lino noticed the deplorable condition of the building, destroyed walls and a huge hole. He asked what had happened, and the girl, with tears in her eyes, explained that her father used to be completely different. Surprised, Lino wondered if the clinic owner had become even more stingy, but she said no. She explained that in the past, her parents loved helping others, always for free. The young doctor wanted to make sure he had understood correctly, and the owner's daughter explained that everything began with a friend of her father who sold a medicinal serum. This man approached her parents offering a high-quality medicine in a special opportunity, which marked the beginning of the changes in the family's life. The aspiring doctor immediately warned the girl that when something is cheap, the quality is almost always disappointing. The issue was obvious, and the nurse, despite her young age, confirmed that she understood correctly. Lino agreed, reaffirming she was right. Still uneasy, the girl asked if he had really heard what she had said. She repeated that on that day, her father had bought a batch of used medication for the clinic, and some patients had severe allergic reactions. Her parents, being responsible doctors, always tried their best to save them. When an elderly man was brought to them, they did everything they could to understand the situation and help him. The owner's daughter explained that the problem was that the medications were counterfeit, and the supplier had vanished. As a result, the Chamber of Commerce and the Drug Administration Department shut down pharmacies and small clinics. In tears, the girl revealed that her family had been paying off debts for years and now owed around $80,000. Lena reflected on how every doctor tries to save others, yet no one escapes the challenges and traps of the world. The nurse continued, saying that her mother couldn't handle the pressure of the debts and passed away, and her father began losing his hair from stress. Suddenly, the girl became embarrassed when Lino hugged her without permission. She reacted by kicking him and demanding that he let go of her immediately. The girl's father approached, asking what was going on and ordering them to stop. Meanwhile, they hurried to prepare dinner. The clinic owner leaned over Lino, who was still on the ground after the blow, and joked that he should play dead, or they would end up charging him even more.
Feeling like an angel, the young doctor quickly stood up and regained his composure. He complimented the girl on the food, saying it was delicious, especially the roast beef with celery, though he joked that he wished there had been more pieces of meat. The clinic owner began shouting at him, outraged, telling him to eat as if he were at a banquet, and saying that if he didn't like it, he should leave. Lino asked him not to take offense, admitting that his comment had been a bit stupid, and emphasized that the food was truly amazing. The old man couldn't believe what he was seeing. That guy really shouldn't have answered with so much boldness. After satisfying his hunger, the improvised doctor asked for permission to go to the bathroom, assuring them he was completely full. Father and daughter agreed that feeding him would be difficult because he ate too much, and that talking about money made no sense. Lino was then taken to the bathroom, told to take a shower, and then returned to the clinic to work. He felt happy to finally have a personal space, and thought about how the bathroom was, in fact, an intimate and sacred place. While washing himself, he couldn't stop thinking about the nurse and her beauty. When he noticed a strange device, he heard the girl warning him not to break her razor. Lino realized he was holding a razor blade and was surprised by the situation. He reflected on how the nurse had been relentless with him and, playfully, swore he would get revenge. He never imagined that from being a businessman, Lino immediately noticed the girl's beautiful legs, but before he could get closer, she closed her fist and punched him, annoyed by his inappropriate behavior on his first day of work. During breakfast, Lino ate carefully, but noticed that the owner of the clinic was holding something that caught his attention, a small piece of bread. He tried to grab it, but the old man warned that it was his food and that Lino should eat his own portion. Ignoring the warning, Lino grabbed the basket of bread, leaving the owner outraged, who yelled at him not to touch what didn't belong to him. The nurse, watching the scene, was surprised by the childish behavior of the young doctor and wondered how an adult could act like that. The old man, looking for an escape, decided to make up an excuse about having stomach pain and quickly walked away. The nurse, anxious to avoid any trouble,
also hurried to put away the medical equipment. A tall man with white hair and a shiny gold tooth walked into the clinic, giving off a clearly threatening presence. Lino turned around, surprised, realizing that this visitor definitely wasn't someone welcome. The man's gold tooth and stern expression immediately caught his attention. Politely, the young doctor asked how he could help him, but the stranger said he was looking for a specific person. Lino, paying attention, noticed swelling on his face, bruises under his eyes, and signs of extreme fatigue.
And Lino calmly answered that it was kidney failure. The old man disagreed, saying that the big hospital had diagnosed a prostate issue. The young doctor asked whether the patient had the courage and strength to go through the treatment, and at that moment, the nurse was secretly listening, hoping the whole situation would end quickly. A burly man approached and asked if Lino could help him, to which he said yes, but explained that the procedure would require money. The visitor, without hesitation, asked for the price, and Lino firmly replied that it would be exactly $0. The patient, annoyed, complained that he didn't have time for that. The clinic owner, watching from a distance, was intrigued by the presence of someone so dangerous. Lino realized the visitor didn't trust his methods and calmly stated that he had been underestimated and could prove his skill right there. Then the young doctor walked up to the man, ready to show what he could do. The young doctor asked the man to simply raise his hands so he could demonstrate his technique. The blonde visitor agreed and lifted his arms. Immediately, a strong and unpleasant odor spread through the clinic, confirming the improvised doctor's diagnosis. The visitor asked whether Lino expected to be paid for the treatment, but the young man confidently picked up an acupuncture needle, like a true specialist in traditional Chinese medicine. He located strategic points under the man's armpits and carefully inserted the needles. A customer who was there grew worried, thinking the procedure looked strange and asking if it could be harmful.
Lino assured him that all they needed was patience and that the body odor would soon disappear. Upon checking, the young doctor confirmed that the unpleasant smell had completely vanished, allowing the patient himself to verify the effectiveness of the treatment. The clinic owner, Mr. Wu, watched with curiosity, wondering if the visitor would have the courage to check the results personally. To everyone's surprise, the blonde man undressed and confirmed that the odor had indeed disappeared after the acupuncture. The nurse, curious, wondered what kind of technique and needles those were and whether Lino truly had that much skill. The clinic owner's daughter, impressed, commented on how the young doctor had solved a problem worth $100,000 with just a single needle. The visitor joked that if he had known the debt was even higher, he would have charged much more. The girl grew emotional, touched by the success of a treatment performed in such a small clinic. Lino explained that his focus always began with the patient's well-being. He assured them that the odor problem was completely solved and that the man could now live a normal life. The patient, calm and satisfied, acknowledged the value of the treatment and asked if there would be any discount. The improvised doctor answered that if the price were lower, the quality of the service would definitely be compromised. The blonde woman was surprised to learn that normally surgery was required to eliminate underarm odor, and she was impressed by Lino's alternative method. Next, the improvised doctor mentioned habits that could improve men's health, such as sleep routines, small portions of scorpion meat, and goshi berries, warning that these supplements required adaptation and shouldn't be overused. He compared the healing of illnesses to stock market cycles, explaining that every process has its own timing. The patient, impressed, acknowledged the accuracy of the young doctor's methods, emphasizing that he wouldn't find an approach like that anywhere else. Despite the success, the burly man, Fan Tong, the family's creditor, said he wouldn't need to pay for the treatment and that the family owed him a lot personally. Lino was surprised, not fully understanding the logic behind the statement, but accepted it humbly. The clinic owner decided to go out and buy food, planning a celebration with real meat that night. The nurse, emotional, thanked the young doctor for helping the family, but at the same time scolded him for his inappropriate behavior, calling him shameless. The girl, regaining her composure, wanted to know more details about the needle used in the treatment, curious about the technique that had saved so many people. The young doctor explained to the nurse that he had used the needle to treat the patient's bad breath, but refused to reveal his professional secrets, which irritated her because she expected to learn something new. Surprised, she asked how he knew the burly man invested in the stock market, and he jokingly suggested that a kiss would reveal all of his methods.
The explanation, however, was simple. The patient kept his eyes on the financial newspaper during the treatment, showing the young doctor's sharp sense of observation. Meanwhile, the clinic owner announced that he would go to the mountains to collect medicinal herbs, unless he could buy them at the pharmacy, and Lino went along with them, thinking to himself how much the old man tried to save money. The nurse, curious, wanted to know more about the young doctor's knowledge, and he admitted he came from the mountains, where he learned everything about traditional medicine and still cared deeply about his patients. During the gathering, the nurse found a rare fake jinjin and leaned over Lino's back to examine the plant closely. The close contact left him completely frozen, which made her furious. She didn't hesitate to kick him in the tailbone, and he ended up falling face first into a pile of autumn leaves, ending the tense moment in a comedic and embarrassing way. The ground suddenly gave in because of an unexpected blow, and the situation hurt more than he imagined. The young man asked the girl not to panic, to take a deep breath and stay calm. The nurse almost stepped on a snake that was devouring a defenseless turtle. Her eyes widened in alarm, and the shock made her freeze. Horrified, she began to scream, begging the young man to save her from the threat. Without thinking twice, she threw herself into his arms, pleading for help. The improvised young doctor wrapped her in a protective embrace, assuring her she was safe and that he would take care of any danger. He calmed her down, explaining there was no reason to be afraid, that with him she was in no danger at all. Then he realized what was actually happening. The snake was just holding the turtle and trying to swallow it. The nurse, still irritated, demanded that he put her down immediately. He tried to defend himself, reminding her that she had jumped into his arms without warning. Grabbing a long stick, the young man struck the snake hard, making the predator back off. The turtle, however, was severely poisoned, and its golden shell was starting to turn green. Golden-shelled turtles were extremely rare in the wild. The clinic owner's daughter suggested they take the snake as well, since it could be useful for various medicinal purposes. The nurse commented that the young man had talent for healing people, and that maybe he could save the turtle. He assured them he could take full responsibility for such a difficult situation. As the day was coming to an end, they realized it was time to head home before it got dark. On the way, they met the clinic owner, and together they continued back home. When they arrived, an unknown visitor approached the owner asking for medicine for rheumatism. Among the basket of remedies, the visitor noticed the golden turtle they had brought from the mountain. Looking closely, he realized it wasn't just an ordinary turtle, but a male.
Extremely rare nowadays. He explained that if it hadn't been poisoned, that turtle could have been sold for an incredible $200,000. Upon hearing about the potential sale, the nurse ran to the young man and spoke firmly, making it clear that he shouldn't even think about selling the turtle they had rescued. The clinic owner approached the young doctor and asked him to keep the girl calm. The young man approached the girl, trying to calm her down, explaining there was no reason to worry. After all, they had just saved the turtle from death, and it made no sense to sell it for money. The clinic owner, however, argued that given their financial situation, thinking about earning money for the family was more important than keeping the turtle. In the middle of the discussion, the buyer interrupted, offering $200,000 for a healthy turtle. The clinic owner immediately warned him not to try deceiving them, reminding him that they had already agreed on a reduced price. The visitor explained that there was a special serum capable of saving the turtle from the poison, and that they only needed to extract the venom without needing to be full-fledged doctors. The clinic owner's daughter became excited, realizing they might actually be able to save the helpless creature. The young doctor assured them that if they left everything to him, he would save the poisoned turtle. The girl, suspicious, called him a scoundrel, accusing him of trying to take advantage of the situation. The clinic owner then seriously asked if he could really treat the reptile. With confidence, he said yes.
but warned that their small clinic didn't have all the necessary supplies. The nurse, eager to help, suggested that he make a list of everything he needed, promising to buy all the supplies for the treatment. The young doctor joked that first he needed a kiss in order to get up from the ground. The clinic owner's daughter quickly shut down the joke, asking him to just write the list properly. Realizing she was serious, the young man began writing down every medicine in detail. The clinic owner, seeing the list, was shocked by the amount of medicine required. The young doctor explained that they would need to spend a little, but they would receive $200,000 as a reward.
The owner agreed, bought all the medicine, and asked the improvised doctor to take care of the turtle. The young man asked the girl to prepare the remedies on low heat, following all his instructions. The nurse, excited, asked if they couldn't wait until her father returned with the groceries. The young doctor, serious, explained that he feared the turtle wouldn't survive until then, so the treatment had to start immediately. Curious, the girl asked why he had sent the clinic owner to buy all those expensive medicines if the situation was so critical. Linao explained that under any other circumstances, Mr. Wu would never have bought such costly medicine, so it was better to act quickly. Chief Yan even offered that if the turtle was cured, he would be willing to trade it for a luxury car. Laura, surprised, asked if he was really serious, since his son had bought a $500,000 car. The improvised doctor realized the turtle wasn't just rare, it was extremely valuable. Chief Yan explained that he already had several females and only needed one male for breeding. Linao suggested not wasting time and starting the treatment right away. The nurse commented that it would be impossible to find oats for the animal because the turtle was too small. The young doctor reassured her, explaining that the medicine on the list would remove the poison in another way. He also added that they could use the herbs they had gathered in the mountains earlier that day. With that, he began preparing the potion, placing the pot on the fire and carefully adding the herbs. Laura watched the poisoned turtle with concern. He explained that there was no need to worry, that he was monitoring the temperature, and that for the reptile, it was like a relaxing sauna. Then he announced that he would open the turtle's mouth to administer the medicine, and after swallowing it, the animal should be placed under a towel soaked in cold water. Chief Yan, watching everything, thought to himself that the method was amazing, strange but amazing, and that the boy clearly knew what he was doing. A little later, Mr. Wu returned and realized he had been tricked about the expensive medicine. In truth, the pharmacy had all the common, cheap medicines the list required. The buyer, impressed, asked how the clinic owner had found such a talented doctor and wanted to know how he would compare his skills to the young doctor's. Without hesitation, the owner admitted that Lin Hao was far superior to him in medicine. Then, the visitor asked where the young doctor had learned everything, at a university or in a family of doctors. Lin Hao calmly replied that there was no need for small talk. Just say what was bothering him and he would take care of it. After that, Lin Hao said that Chief Yan didn't need to worry about selling the rescued turtle. Even Mr. Wu agreed that the young doctor had saved the animal, so the decision of what to do with it belonged entirely to Lin Hao.
He explained that the buyer had caught his attention, but he wouldn't part with the turtle for even $1 million until he understood its condition better. Chief Yang responded that if the young doctor could cure it, he wouldn't mind paying that amount. An awkward silence filled the room, and the man wondered anxiously if the visitor might be sick. Lin Hao realized that the silence said everything. The buyer then admitted that he had already been to many hospitals and had lost all hope, but that the young doctor might still be able to help him. Lin Hao guaranteed that he could cure the illness, but instead of asking for $1 million, he requested 8 female turtles as payment. Laura was outraged. How could he make a joke like that? And was he really capable of curing something as serious as cancer? The young doctor noticed that she still didn't fully believe him, so he explained that to prove his confidence, she could bet on the outcome of the treatment. He started explaining the terms of the bet, but quickly changed the subject, adding a bolder condition. If he managed to cure the patient, Laura would have to give him a kiss. Mr. Wu heard the proposal and accepted the terms without
without hesitation, sealing the agreement. The nurse, upset, turned to her father and questioned what he was doing. The young doctor then asked them to bring a pumpkin from the clinic's backyard so he could prepare the remedy. He explained that he needed the pumpkin seeds to treat the serious condition, and asked Laura to also bring some fresh fruit from the bitter tree. He explained that this plant, common in some Asian countries, had an extremely bitter taste, but was essential for the treatment. Laura quickly found both ingredients and prepared them according to his instructions. Everyone present was surprised, wondering if something so simple could really cure cancer. Chief J, skeptical, asked if he was serious about the patient only needing to eat that to get better. To him, it sounded absurd.
Lin Hao assured the buyer that it would really help and that the best thing to do was to take the entire remedy at once. The man still didn't believe that such a serious illness could be cured with such simple methods. Even so, he took the prepared ball and swallowed it, followed by a bowl of bitter soup. His eyes turned red like fire, and he started shouting about how horribly bitter it tasted. Everyone wondered what was happening. Right after taking the remedy, the buyer immediately needed a bowl to vomit. While he did, everyone noticed something strange. There were worms in the bowl that hadn't been there before. Lin Hao explained that the dark spots on the patient's liver weren't tumors, but intestinal parasites that had now been eliminated from his body. With the treatment successfully completed, the young doctor approached the nurse, reminding her of the promised kiss from their bet. Laura, still upset, said she needed to finish what she was doing before thinking about that. Chief J and the buyer, impressed, started asking questions about the treatment. The visitor wanted to be sure he had never actually had cancer, since other doctors had diagnosed him based on the X-ray, especially because of the darkening on the liver. Lin Hao explained that X-rays could be misleading. Many doctors saw a dark spot and assumed cancer, but a new X-ray would show that the spot had moved, something impossible for a tumor. He explained that the liver cleans the body of toxins, and the symptoms were very similar to those of cancer. In addition, the yellowish color in the corners of his eyes indicated the presence of parasites. The buyer, now hopeful, asked if it was possible to say that the illness had truly disappeared. Lin Hao confidently confirmed he was cured. He then asked about the 8 turtles that had been promised. Chief J, smiling, declared that the turtles now belonged to him since he had saved the man's life with the treatment. Now Lin Hao had both male and female turtles for breeding. Mr. Bu got excited, saying those weren't just ordinary turtles, but a real gold mine capable of producing even more valuable offspring. Hungry, the young doctor commented that he wanted a big crab for dinner and asked if they could arrange a banquet. The clinic owner laughed, saying the boy had a huge appetite, but that a celebratory dinner actually made sense.
The buyer thanked them for the idea, but admitted that giving up his beloved turtles had been extremely difficult. Chief Yang then called Mr. Wu for a private conversation about an important personal matter. The buyer mentioned that his daughter was still unmarried and asked for her opinion about the young, talented doctor. Laura, watching the 2 grown men talk quietly, grew curious and wondered what they were discussing so mysteriously. Lin Hao laughed, suggesting they might be talking about marriage prospects involving Laura. The nurse said she was the only one who knew how to cook the crab, so if he really wanted to eat it, he should refuse the kiss. Realizing it wouldn't be that easy, the young man acted quickly and kissed her unexpectedly. Laura was embarrassed and furious, questioning his boldness, while he leaned back and reflected on the situation. What a bore, the young doctor thought. There wasn't a single interesting patient at the moment. Suddenly, a large, unfamiliar man entered the clinic, asking if a woman named Laura was there because he had something important to discuss. Lin Hao explained that the nurse hadn't arrived yet, but that the visitor could contact her if it was urgent. Soon after, another unfamiliar customer asked for syringes, claiming his pig needed a vaccine. Lin Hao checked the syringes to make sure they were the right size, but in his hurry, the visitor grabbed the tools and tried to leave without paying. The young doctor shouted after him, reminding him that he still hadn't received the change. The visitor apologized and handed over the money, paying more than he owed by mistake, 50 instead of 32. Laura appeared at that moment,
curious, asking why the man needed syringes. The visitor, confused, explained that he had come back quickly because he had forgotten something, even though he had already bought what he needed. He said the needles were too big for what he needed and asked for 1 ml syringes. Laura got irritated, asking how he expected to vaccinate pigs with something so small. Lin Hao, remaining calm, just asked her to give him the correct syringes and some saline solution. But something felt wrong and asked the visitor why he needed the solution and what he intended to use it for.
The young doctor pulled up the man's sleeve and noticed 2 strange marks on his arm, right over the vein, clear signs of injectable drug use. Lin Hao said he didn't need the syringes anymore and watched as the visitor tried to run out of the clinic. Laura quickly assumed he had been sent by members of the 8 Demons gang to get medical supplies. The improvised doctor realized that this group was addicted to dangerous substances and terrorized the town, persuading young people to get involved with drugs. Some more cautious patients walked into the clinic, questioning the nurse about the rude behavior they had just witnessed. Soon, the entire 8 Demons gang showed up, and an awkward silence filled the room. One of them told the girl that her cousin was getting better, which left Laura furious. She demanded to know who this so-called cousin was and ordered him to leave the clinic immediately. The red-haired woman commented that, whether Laura liked it or not, she had to admit they were related. A friend of hers walked up to the red-haired leader, confessing he had fallen in love with his cousin at first sight. The nurse immediately warned them that they needed to leave because she got angry very easily. One of the thugs insisted, saying he liked girls like Laura and invited her to come closer. One member of the gang tried to kiss Lin Hao, but when the guy opened his eyes, he realized he wasn't kissing a girl. He was kissing another doctor. Lin Hao firmly stated that he would never sell syringes for illegal use and that if they weren't satisfied, they should just leave instead of intimidating the girl. The thugs started mocking him, saying he thought he was some kind of hero and looked eager to die at their hands. The young doctor replied that he had heard enough empty threats and challenged them. Let's see who beats who. Laura immediately worried for her friend's safety, but Lin smiled and told her not to worry. Those guys couldn't do anything to him. When the thugs backed away, Lin Hao gave them 2 options. He could fight them or he could let them walk away. The group, irritated, decided that the gang deserved a lesson because things had gone way too far.
But the young doctor wasn't intimidated. In fact, he was amused by the foolish excitement of a bunch of street punks. Like a true martial arts master, Lin Hao instantly found each person's weak points with just his fingers. Within seconds, the thugs collapsed onto the floor, leaving only the leader standing. Shocked, the leader yelled for his men to get up, unable to believe what had just happened. Watching everything, Laura thought it was incredible. Lin Hao knew every sensitive point in the human body. The young doctor took pride in his skill, knowing those thugs weren't even a warm-up for a real fight. But the gang leader didn't back down. He pulled a knife from his pocket, ready to attack. Laura immediately shouted, warning about the danger. Lin Hao locked his eyes on his opponent, serious and focused, then disarmed him with a powerful punch, neutralizing the threat instantly. The nurse couldn't believe what she was seeing. He then approached the defeated leader and demanded that he take off his belt and hand it over. Embarrassed, the thug obeyed, while his men whispered about how humiliating it was to be overpowered by a mere doctor. The leader tried to fight back, but Lin Hao didn't hesitate. He struck him with his own belt, forcing him to stumble back in pain. After that, the young doctor asked who else wanted to feel the power of the belt. Laura watched, wondering why he kept those weirdos there instead of kicking them out immediately. Lin Hao continued punishing the thugs, teaching them a clear lesson about the consequences of drug trafficking in the area. He turned to the gang leader and demanded silence, warning that another punch was coming if he kept acting disrespectfully. After putting the gang in their place, the young doctor asked Laura to call the director, explaining that he had an idea for how to raise money for the clinic. The nurse, curious, asked if he planned to use the method to treat the addicts. Lin Hao confidently replied that she was absolutely right. Laura had become sharper and finally understood Lin Hao's true intentions. The young doctor reassured her, explaining that even in a difficult situation, he knew exactly what he was doing. When the director finally arrived, angry, he asked the doctor what was going on with the local thugs.
He wanted to know if Lin Hao had any
any idea who those people were and how he had the nerve to speak to such dangerous individuals that way. But surprisingly, the gang members claimed that they were now part of the Crisis Lovers clan and that they no longer dealt drugs. Laura and Lin Hao found the statement so ridiculous that they couldn't hold back their laughter and told them to stop. When the troublemakers tried to stand up, Lin Hao simply said, "Who told you to get up? Stay where you are." He advised them to remain still until the director arrived because no one knew how he would react. At that moment, the turtle buyer arrived, curious to know what had happened and why he had been called so suddenly. It was then revealed that the gang leader was the director's nephew, which explained the family connection. The thug, in tears, ran to his uncle, begging him for help, and claiming that Lin Hao had hurt him badly. He pointed at the doctor and demanded that his uncle show him who was responsible. Chief Yang, unfazed, simply kicked his nephew in the shoulder, scolding him for his shameful behavior. He commented that it was a shame Lin Hao hadn't beaten the brat to death given his involvement in drug dealing. The nephew was shocked and outraged, but the director replied that if he had any dignity at all, he would have died of shame 1,000 times by now. Laura tried to explain everything to Chief Yang, but was interrupted. The director said there was no need. He simply couldn't understand why those troublemakers were inside the clinic. Meanwhile, the turtle buyer approached Lin Hao, asking for help with a family issue. The young doctor said he understood what she meant, but there were still things he needed to address first. He needed to contact the parents of the children involved. The parents of the gang members arrived at the clinic to discuss their children's addictions. Chief Yang explained that this man, Lin Hao, was practically a gift from God, saying that he had even cured his own children who had been in a desperate state. The parents were shocked to learn that such serious illnesses and addictions could be treated in such a small clinic without sophisticated equipment. Chief Yang didn't hold back. He scolded them harshly, blaming their negligence for allowing their children to grow so out of control. The director then explained that due to an illness, he had left a prosperous life in a big city to become the leader of that small town.
The turtle buyer said he had lost all hope of recovery and had been preparing for death, but Lin Hao saved him. Chief Yang scolded the parents again, asking if they had ever shown any real responsibility for their children. Under pressure, the parents promised that a wealthy man would cover all the treatment costs, ensuring everyone would be satisfied. Lin Hao, always cautious, asked the director if he was sure he wanted to pay for the treatment of the 8 delinquents, since it would be expensive, about 1,000,000 yuan. The buyer responded that if lives could be saved, why not use the money? The young doctor then made one important thing clear. From that moment on, no one was allowed to interfere with his treatment methods. His eyes took on an almost demonic look, frightening the 8 gang members. He handed them a document to sign, making sure the agreement was binding and that there would be no problems later. They all left their fingerprints on it, and Lin Hao reassured the parents that they could relax now. With the parents gone, only the director stayed behind, inviting Mr. Wu to play a game of chess while the treatment began. Lin Hao started preparing his medicinal mixture, turning it into small, bitter granules for oral use. He explained to the teens that they could either take the medicine or get beaten almost to death. Terrified, the gang members agreed immediately and swallowed the medication without resistance. The doctor, alert, noticed someone trying to hide the medicine under their tongue and warned them. Lin Hao finished by saying that those who had already taken the medication could leave, but shouldn't forget to come back for follow-ups. The next day at 3 p.m., the teens, still surprised, asked again if they were really allowed to go home after such a serious warning. Lin Hao confirmed they could, reminding them that he expected them back the next day to continue the treatment. Laura showed up, curious, wanting to know where all those kids had gone. Lin Hao explained that he had simply sent them home. He told the nurse he was sure that if the treatment stayed painful, none of them would ever return voluntarily. In fact, the teens had been talking among themselves, saying the doctor was a complete idiot if he thought they would put up with the abuse.
Laura, confused, asked why he had just let them leave without finishing the treatment. Lin Hao answered mysteriously that he wanted to show everyone exactly what would happen if they tried to resist. After that, he invited Laura to go to town with him to buy special medical equipment for the clinic. Mr. Wu, irritated, complained that the equipment they had wasn't enough and that the family didn't have money to buy more. Lin Hao pointed to the bundle of cash and asked what they were supposed to do with the $100,000 meant for the turtles. The clinic owner finally realized it was true and agreed to the trip. Lin Hao warned that if the director went alone, he'd probably end up buying something other than the equipment they needed. The man, angry at the distrust, promised he would purchase only the best equipment for the clinic. Laura decided to go too, but suggested stopping by her house first to change. While they were walking, the heat was intense, and distracted, she tripped and started to fall. Lin Hao shouted for her to be careful and ran to catch her, but at the last second, Laura begged him to let go. Startled, he released her, and the nurse fell to her knees on the hard ground. She thought to herself that she was in a lot of pain and could barely stand up after such an unlucky fall. Lin Hao explained it was an accident and that he only wanted to help her up. They then decided that using Chief Ian's car would be the best option to make things easier. They boarded the bus heading to the city. During the trip, Laura asked the young doctor for his documents so she could sign him up for the health plan. Lin Hao answered seriously that he didn't have any ID or passport. Surprised, the nurse asked how it was possible for someone to have no documents at all. The boy asked her to promise she wouldn't tell anyone. Laura felt like she was finally about to understand something about the mysterious personality of that boy. A moment of silence hung in the air as he began revealing his past. Lin Hao said he had been sold multiple times and transported on ships with other children like him. He lost all sense of time while being held captive, living through a real hell. The kidnappers provided no medical care. Sick children were simply thrown into the sea like useless cargo. As he spoke, Laura squeezed his hand in a gesture of support and compassion. Curious, she asked what happened after that horrible period.
Lin Hao explained that after they were transferred to an old castle on top of a mountain, the nightmare only got worse. Every day, they were subjected to cruel medical experiments that determined each child's fate. The training consisted of making them kill each other. At first, there were 100 children, but only 10 survived the trials. After the training ended, Lin Hao was assigned to a concentration camp specialized in human medical testing, a place filled with people obsessed with cruel research. There, every day, live patients were sent in for experiments, and sometimes even corpses were examined. Despite all the horror, the guards soon realized Lin Hao had a natural talent for medicine. At just 16, he could already diagnose diseases accurately and perform complex surgeries on his own. Laura, horrified, asked how he managed to escape that nightmare. Lin Hao admitted he had to pretend he was going to off himself to get out of the camp. The nurse, shocked, repeated the expression, unable to believe what she heard. The boy simply said he was exhausted from the work, letting the heavy silence fill the bus. Sometimes Lin Hao had to treat 140 patients a day. Laura, intrigued, asked how he could handle so many people. She still remembered everything he had told her about his past and suspected what he meant earlier about pretending he would end everything, wondering if he really faked it to escape certain death. Lin Hao explained that after a year in captivity, he discovered a drug that could temporarily stop the heart. The young doctor realized how risky it was and almost died of an overdose. Laura couldn't believe what she was hearing and anxiously asked how he survived. Lin Hao said he didn't know exactly, but they had held a funeral for him, and luckily the guards didn't cremate the body. After some time, the effect of the drug wore off, and if they had examined him earlier, they would have realized he was still alive. The improvised doctor was lucky to have a sharp knife with him, which he used to open the coffin from the inside. Without it, he really would have died right there. After that, he hid on a cargo ship and traveled for 3 months until he reached China. Lin Hao assured Laura he had no reason to lie and asked her to keep it a secret, and she promised she would. He explained that he didn't want to put the girl in danger because of his past while he was driving. At that moment, he noticed a thug in a red sports car trying to overtake them on the road, creating a dangerous situation. Lin Hao became furious when he saw the driver's audacity, remembering that he considered himself the king of that stretch of road.
Laura tried to calm him down, reminding him that he didn't even have a driver's license or an ID. Suddenly, the red sports car got into a serious accident,
crashing into another vehicle that was speeding. The car doors slowly opened, revealing a blonde drunk who could barely stand due to intoxication. The drunk driver yelled aggressively at anyone who tried to stop him, calling the person responsible for the crash an idiot. Witnesses were outraged, realizing that he was not only driving drunk, but also behaving in a rude and reckless manner. The passenger got out of the red car, worried, asking her boyfriend what had happened on the road. The blonde drunk moved toward the black car, ready to fight the other driver. He yelled at the victims, asking how they dared to stop him from driving freely. People who witnessed the scene found his behavior disgusting and irresponsible. Lin Hao understood that no one knew who he was, so he didn't need to draw attention, but he also knew that the most important thing now was saving lives. Everything else could wait. He approached the drunk, grabbed him by the head, and pushed him away. The passenger was outraged to see her boyfriend being touched and asked why, but he didn't even know who she was. Lin Hao gently pushed her aside, telling her to move away from the crash site. He then noticed gasoline leaking from the damaged tank, making the situation even more dangerous. He asked people nearby for help, but everyone said they would wait for the police. That was when Lin Hao noticed something alarming. A pregnant woman was unconscious inside the wrecked car. Laura yelled in concern, warning that someone might be seriously injured, but Lin Hao simply ordered her to stay back. With determination, he grabbed the broken door handle and managed to open the door. Time was short. Every second counted. The officers who arrived suggested that he rescue the pregnant woman while they handled the rest. But the improvised doctor didn't hesitate. With the woman in his arms, he ran, even with the car about to explode due to the spilled fuel. Moments later, there was a loud explosion behind him, but Lin Hao managed to shield the woman, saving her from certain death. The officer and nurses were anxious about the woman's condition.
Lin Hao fell to his knees, assessing the severity of her injuries, his teeth clenched in total concentration. He shouted for Laura to grab the first aid kit from the car immediately. Without wasting time, he stood up and brought everything he needed to treat her. At that moment, the blonde drunk approached again, threatening to show who was in charge there. The police realized the threat and prepared themselves, while Laura stepped forward to stop that idiot from attacking the doctor who had just saved lives. The policewoman lifted her leg to strike the villain, and part of her underwear became visible under her skirt. She hit the thug directly in the face, neutralizing the threat. Lin Hao realized the girl had truly helped him. She was a top-notch professional. He knew he would have to take risks to save the life of the fetus inside the mother. He immediately asked the nurse to put the victim on a respirator and started the emergency procedures by himself. The police officer asked how she could help, but he told her that her job was to make sure the ambulance arrived quickly, not to act as a doctor. Lin Hao evaluated the victim and noticed he would need to apply pressure on specific points, even knowing it would cause intense pain. The officers, worried about the patient's bleeding, asked him to do something. The young improvised doctor realized it was internal bleeding and thought about how to keep the victim alive without advanced equipment. He calculated that he could keep her stable for about 20 minutes, long enough for the ambulance to arrive. The police, making sure the situation was under control, dispersed the crowd and cleared a path for the ambulance. Some people refused to move, so the officer, exhausted, pulled out her service weapon and ordered them to open the street. Lin Hao admired her courage. Risking her own career to maintain order wasn't easy. Laura approached and informed him that the pregnant woman had woken up and wanted to speak with him. The woman, still weak, asked that her husband and daughter-in-law be notified about what had happened. When the ambulance arrived, Lin Hao emphasized that the most important thing was protecting the pregnant woman during transport. He turned to Laura, telling her to step back and let the medical team handle their job.
Meanwhile, the blonde drunk who caused the accident was starting to wake up, completely lost and not understanding anything that had happened. The drunk driver was confronted by a police officer who demanded that he accompany her to the station. The drunk's companion tried to dodge responsibility, shamelessly saying he had done nothing wrong and even calling the officer stupid. But she identified herself with authority as a member of the Ministry of Public Security, and both were charged with drunk driving in public and disorderly conduct. Meanwhile, the officers realized that Lin Hao, the young doctor who had saved the pregnant woman, had simply disappeared. After providing first aid, he quickly got into the car with Laura and left. The nurse noted, still amazed, that the method he used to save the woman was extremely complex, something she had only seen in books. Laura noticed he had injured his knees during the rescue. Lin Hao brushed it off, saying it was nothing, but then he noticed two girls standing
standing near the clinic, one with green hair and the other with purple hair. They seemed to be arguing about something serious, and he immediately understood that the situation with those kids wasn't simple. Laura asked why the girls were staring and what they were going to do about the group they had brought back to town. The boy took a moment to understand, but then he saw the same 8 demons, the gang members, still lying on the ground groaning. Lin Hao approached them and warned them that they were a whole day late, and if they didn't want trouble, they should follow him immediately. The purple-haired girl was outraged, questioning how he dared talk to them like that, but her friend calmed her down, suggesting they wait and see what the doctor would actually do for the kids. Yek yelled, asking him to help those suffering teenagers, but Lin Hao just observed, staying calm. He explained to the girls that nothing could be done until Chief Yang arrived. Meanwhile, Laura was taking care of the doctor's injured knee, which he had hurt during the rescue of the pregnant woman. The young man, complaining about the pain, acted like a child before the procedure, and the nurse tried to calm him, explaining that the pain would pass quickly. 2 unfamiliar girls were surprised by how firm he remained. After all, it wasn't every day someone handled pain without complaining.
Suddenly, Chief Yang showed up and addressed the girls, Jeg and Jae-song, asking why Lin Hao had brought them there. He then approached his nephew, demanding an explanation for what had happened and why he looked so worn out. The young man tried to discredit the doctor, calling him a fraud and suggesting that everyone should leave immediately. Lin Hao realized things would be even more complicated this time. Working with girls always required more caution, especially with clear signs of injectable substance use. Jansong, suspicious, asked if everything was a trap to lure the girls in. Jez grabbed her friend's hand, warning that they needed to leave immediately. But Lin Hao didn't give them a chance to run. He rushed toward them and precisely pressed specific points on their backs, immobilizing them instantly. The girls fell to the ground, twisting in pain. Lin then explained to Chief Yang that treating women would be more difficult and expensive, and they would have to stay there. Laura, hearing that, became furious, thinking she'd only agree to that over her own dead body. The members of the 8 Demons gang also protested, rejecting the conditions. The young doctor didn't waste time. He made the director's nephew and his friends take medication to counter the diarrhea caused by the treatment from the previous day. Turning to the girls, Lin Hao instructed them to follow him for a medical examination, leaving them terrified. He explained that he could evaluate their bodies accurately, even under severe dependency symptoms. Gaia complained that she felt awful and wanted to leave immediately. Jansong could barely move, frozen and desperate from withdrawal. The doctor approached the distressed girls and calmly told her she didn't need to focus on the pain of withdrawal. She only needed to prepare herself for treatment, accepting that this was the path to recovery. Hearing their plea for help, Laura acted quickly, preparing the necessary medication to ease the girls' withdrawal symptoms. Jez was also crying, begging to go home, so Lin Hao led them to the treatment room for immediate care. The young doctor asked Laura to close the door and help remove the patient's clothes so he could apply the special medicinal solution to their backs. He emphasized the need to act fast, since the girl's awareness was fragile.
Laura commented that there was only enough medication for one person and asked what to do about Jae-song. Lin replied that it was a rare sedative and that he would have to take the risk of administering it. At that moment, Chief Yang knocked on the door, but Lin remained completely focused on the treatment, fully aware that the girl's survival depended on his speed and precision. Suddenly, Yaya stood up, attacked the doctor, and shouted that she didn't want to be treated. Lin calmed Laura down and asked her to take care of the second patient. Jansen, furious, yelled that everything was a lie and that she would rather die than keep living that way. The green-haired girl complained about the pain, angry at the suffering. Lin Hao approached her, hugged her, and asked her not to give up. The girl, in a burst of aggression, bit his shoulder. Laura noticed the gesture and commented on the pain he must have been feeling, but Lin simply said that everything would be fine. They just needed to get through the storm. Meanwhile, uncle and nephew had no idea what was happening in the infirmary. Lin Hao clenched his fists and punched the gang leader, demanding to know why he had brought the girls to the facility. The leader, intimidated, said that nothing could change, and Lin decided to focus on a solution. He explained that the past didn't matter anymore, and instructed the boys to get ready for the exam. The other gang members began to understand how serious the situation was. The young doctor grew stern, ordering the red-haired thug to lie down on the examination table. The boy resisted, but Lin forced him,
threatening him with the belt. After the warning, he agreed, asking only not to be hurt. Laura suggested that the patient leave the room, but Lin insisted that gender didn't matter and that anyone who couldn't handle the treatment would have to leave. To accommodate the remaining patients, Lin Hao decided to go to the backyard and set up tents, ordering Laura to perform the required inspection. The nurse felt uncomfortable, hesitating to approach the boys for the exam, but she obeyed, aware she couldn't falter. The girl understood the need to collect a blood sample and performed the procedure, causing the boys to scream in pain. The other thugs heard the screams and were terrified, wanting to escape, afraid of what was happening in the procedure room. The doctor returned to the girls and explained that he needed to examine them to reach a complete diagnosis. Gia was outraged, as her friend was already weak, and questioned why they needed to examine the second girl.
Lin Hao explained that since they would stay at the clinic for 2 months, it was essential to ensure there was no risk of infection. The purple-haired girl called him a demon, complaining about the strict treatment conditions. Jansen tried to calm her friend down, reminding her that they had already passed the first test and that quitting was not an option.
The doctor turned to the boys, asking why they were still sitting there without clothes, even after the exam had ended.
He then explained that the girls would also need to partially undress for the exam, which made them very uncomfortable. They asked again if that was really necessary. Yai, hesitant, said she would not undress in front of any man. Ling Hao replied that the exam was essential and that the situation allowed no discussion. Gia, irritated, said she didn't believe she was sick and didn't have any transmissible diseases, but the doctor insisted on the need for cooperation. Reluctantly, the girls slowly began preparing for the exam, feeling unusual shame and discomfort. Laura stayed beside her to supervise and help with the blood collection, ensuring everything was done safely. After collecting the sample, Lin reviewed the report and confirmed that the girl was healthy. He then asked for the next patient to be prepared for examination, keeping the treatment fast and precise. Ling Krao released the girl and asked her to call her sister, since she also needed to undergo the exam. He explained to Jansen that there was no reason to feel embarrassed, as everything would only take a few minutes. Even so, the girl was still extremely ashamed. Laura was instructed to collect a blood sample from the patient for analysis. Noticing her white and delicate skin, the doctor himself reflected on how fragile bodies were especially vulnerable to illness. After finishing the exam, Lin joked about the girl's appearance, leaving Laura visibly embarrassed. He asked what she was thinking, then sent the girls to the backyard for the next step. The improvised doctor gave each of them a bucket and explained that they needed to gather worms in the area, filling the buckets to the top. Gia complained, saying she could barely stand from the effort. Ling Hao then offered an alternative. She could wash clothes and other dirty items instead of dealing with worms. The girl received a bucket full of dirty laundry, which made her complain, thinking that collecting worms would have been less disgusting. While they worked, the doctor mentioned that if they finished the task quickly, they could finally eat. The purple-haired girl complained about the strong smell of the dirty clothes. Jae Song, distracted, noticed the golden turtles and imagined that with so many of them, they could be worth a fortune. Meanwhile, the two thugs complained to each other, tired of collecting worms. One of them said they had only filled half the bucket and complained that the doctor wouldn't let them leave the clinic, not even to buy something outside. The leader, frustrated, grumbled about how ridiculous his life had become, from imaginary greatness to a humiliating punishment involving worms. He blamed the girl who had alerted the police, irritated with the situation. After all the humiliation and forced labor, the doctor brought the hungry thug a juicy chicken drumstick. The boy couldn't hide his desire when he looked at the food. When the gang leader complained that he didn't want to eat, Lin Hao told him to shut up, devour the meal, and then go back to looking for worms for medicinal use. The leader, resigned, cried when he realized how much time he had wasted. Laura approached and told the doctor that she'd had a rough day and needed to eat something. He looked at the plate and couldn't help noticing how appetizing everything looked. The nurse asked the child if he was enjoying the food, and the answer came with excitement. He had never tasted anything as delicious as that pasta. Suddenly, a man came running, saying that the Luna family was in danger and
when asking if there was any doctor around, the gang leader was shocked and wanted to know what had happened. The messenger reported that the house was surrounded by more than 30 people and that the group's leader threatened to burn the place down, believing that Zhang might be hiding there. When they arrived, Lin Hao and the others were surprised to discover who was behind the attack. The same dark-haired girl from the gang, who stared at Lin Hao with sarcasm, asking if he was finally tired of hiding like a coward.
The gang leader explained that she had given him a pack of cigarettes, which he shared with the others, but the tobacco had been mixed with illegal substances. The dark-haired thug was outraged, asking who she thought she was to try to hit him. The girl, pointing at the doctor, declared that he should pay for everything that had happened to her people. Lin Ha replied coldly that he wasn't interested in girls like her and wouldn't take responsibility for anything. This enraged the bandit, who started shouting about justice and revenge. Lin Ha, in turn, laughed at the situation, finding it amusing that she tried to oppose him, while her bodyguards prepared to step in, threatening to punish the insolent doctor for insulting her. The chaos began with the improvised doctor being attacked from all sides. He quickly positioned himself, defending against the blows with a firm stance. Lanu then lifted his leg and delivered a powerful kick, surprising the attackers. Those watching realized he wasn't just some ordinary guy. He knew martial arts and exactly how to protect himself. The bandits tried to change their strategy, attacking together, but Lin Ha handled them with agility. So Lin Ha advanced toward the dark-haired bandit, the leader of the group. When he reached her, he said he had never hit a girl before, but he would make an exception. Her surprise was obvious. All her armed guards had fallen around her like dominoes. She quickly drew a gun, trying to intimidate him, but Lin Ha wasn't shaken. He pretended the police were arriving and, using the moment of distraction, took the weapon from her. The defeated criminal seemed destined for prison. The police arrived shortly after, and Chief Yang appeared, apologizing for what had happened.
Lin Hao pointed out the criminals for arrest, and the officers began handcuffing everyone. Surprisingly, the boy himself was also tied up, not understanding why. In the end, everyone was taken away, and the chief assured the young doctor that he wouldn't remain in that situation for long. The victory had been achieved, but the consequences still brought confusion and tension. The director's nephew commented that his uncle had a lot of money, but very little real influence. Laura was anxious, unsure if the young doctor would be able to handle such a complicated situation. When they brought Lin Hao to the police station, they explained that they knew everything, but they couldn't verify his identity. Without fingerprints or documents, investigators tried to figure out who he really was. The police even suspected that the lack of records might mean he was a spy or even a terrorist. Desperate, Lin Hao tried to explain that it was all a misunderstanding. He was just an ordinary village doctor. A police officer, surprised, noticed that the detainee looked like a man his superiors were searching for. Taking out his phone, he began explaining that his uncle had mentioned this doctor from another town, which could clarify why they were so interested in him. The confirmation came. That doctor really was the one who had saved the chief's family, responsible for rescuing people in a traffic accident days earlier. Relieved, Lim Hao realized he was finally safe. They placed him back in the patrol car, which sped off. Even so, the young doctor asked to go alone, without an escort, but the police chief insisted. He was the hero whom the chief's sister and son needed to thank personally. They told him his intervention had saved lives and that he had been searched for a long time as a true hero. Modest as always, Lin Ha replied that he didn't need any thanks. It was simply his responsibility as a doctor. The officer introduced himself as Shen, explaining that they could contact him if they ever needed anything.
Lin Hao found the name curious, remembering it could be translated as madness. He then asked about how easy it was to get identification documents in the country, and the chief assured him it was simple, telling him to leave all those worries to them. When they arrived at their destination, Shen explained that they could head home now. He would spend a few days at the chief's sister's house and would take care of sending the identity documents with no need for in-person delivery. Lin Hao only asked that they send the papers in a practical way, by mail or electronic service. The tension finally eased, replaced by a quiet relief, knowing everything was settled.
at least for now. The boy realized that even though he had hoped for some valuable reward, a simple ID document was already enough. When he turned around, he saw Laura still at the clinic, busy washing a huge pile of clothes. She ran to him, throwing herself into his arms and calling him silly for scaring her so much. With tears in her eyes, she admitted she had no idea how worried she had been about his safety. The young doctor reassured her, saying everything was fine, and asked about the bandits. Laura explained that while he was away, the children behaved exceptionally well, and her father looked after them. Feeling strangely drawn to her, the boy gave her a light tap, and the nurse suggested he go home, promising to cook something special. Lin Hao thought it all felt odd, as if something had happened while he was gone. Looking around, he saw the bandits sitting beside Laura's father, complaining about being tired of treating patients. They hadn't tried to escape during his absence, showing determination to endure the treatment. The gang leader asked for help to ease his suffering, and the improvised doctor instructed Laura to get a rope and tie the patient to a tree for safety. Surprisingly, they obeyed and secured the leader to a trunk in the clinic's yard.
Lin Hao explained that they were running low on medicine and would have to endure the withdrawal symptoms. The director's nephew suggested acupuncture, but the doctor explained it wouldn't be effective in this case. So anyone who felt too ill would be tied to a tree for safety. Soon, all the patients fell sick at the same time, and 2 girls and 2 boys ended up tied up. Ji began shouting, calling them monsters, but the leader advised her to stay quiet. The silence reminded Laura that Lin Hao had faced 30 armed opponents the day before. Everyone was exhausted, and the doctor carried the heaviest burden of all. Laura emphasized that even if it looked pointless, his effort had saved everyone. The clinic owner's daughter concluded that Lin Hao truly deserved to be called more of a doctor than anyone else. The boy had collapsed from exhaustion and fallen asleep over the desk, but they soon began waking him insistently. Laura shouted for him to get up, explaining that someone was looking for him and had already arrived at the clinic. Half asleep, Lin Hao was still lost in vivid dreams filled with beautiful women and resisted waking up. When he finally opened his eyes, he groggily asked who could be looking for him at that hour, and was told it was Chief Shen and his sister, the one he had saved from the car accident. They arrived accompanied by another unfamiliar man, introduced as the sister's husband. The purpose of the visit was to deliver important documents and express their gratitude. To the young doctor's surprise, the visitors brought an enormous stack of official papers, far more than the simple ID document he had been expecting. Lin Hao realized how high Shen's position was within the system, but the police chief responded modestly, saying this was not about showing off, but about repaying the debt of gratitude for saving his family's lives. The rescued woman's husband tried to kneel, but Lin Hao quickly stopped him, saying times had changed and there was no need to humiliate himself before an ordinary doctor. Shen's sister reinforced that they were only there to express their thanks, and Shen apologized for not having prepared a more proper form of recognition. He explained that he only had $200,000 available to save his family, not millions as some might imagine. The improvised doctor thanked them for the visit and was relieved to hear that the baby had been born healthy.
He explained that newborns often showed jaundice or other minor symptoms, then administered the necessary medication after examining the child. The woman was surprised by the accuracy of his diagnosis and the speed of his treatment. Noticing it was getting late, Lin Hao suggested that it would be better for everyone to head home, avoiding dangerous nighttime travel. The chief assured him that if anything happened, they only needed to call. Watching the man, Lin Hao thought he looked old enough to be someone's father on the sister's side and felt relieved that everything was finally under control. The improvised doctor opened the envelope of documents and found, among the papers, the keys to an expensive BMW. Laura approached and explained that the car, a BMW X6, was still parked at the clinic. He realized that the vehicle and its plates had been paid for as a gesture of thanks, a present even better than Chief Ya's car. However, along with the keys was a warning. The Green Gang might try to come after him, and a phone number was provided for emergencies. The boy understood that this was a dangerous group, and that the father of the dark-haired girl was involved.
Laura mentioned the name Renjian, immediately catching his attention. He asked if she knew him, and the nurse explained that he was the deputy mayor, which explained his enormous influence. Some patients looked impressed with the car and commented about the gift. Suspicious, Lin Hao stepped aside and made an important phone call. Using the danger alert number, he contacted Police Chief Shen to clarify the situation about the BMW. Shen explained that the idea had been his sister's. Lin Hao's old car was terrible, so they decided to give him something better, fully legal, purchased with the family's savings, and registered under his sister's company's name. Shen assured him that there was no need to worry and emphasized that compared to saving their lives, the gift meant nothing to them. He also warned that the Green Gang's father was extremely influential and that the drunk driver had already been released on bail. Lin Hao thanked him for the warning and asked what problems they might face with the criminal back on the streets. Meanwhile, Genzo called the doctor, addressing him as the supervisor of their strict addiction treatment program. She complained about the boredom of digging and asked if she could at least go for a walk. Lin Hao replied that it would be great, but she'd have to wait until next Wednesday.